I am about to give you an update about our very first book study. Now, we just finished All About Reading. It's an excellent reading program, and we did a little activity before we started this book study. If you missed that, so please go back to my account and see our very first lesson after All About Reading. So today I'm going to show you what we did for our very first book study, and maybe this can inspire you to do your own. No curriculum needed, and you just need to do some research and do a little bit of work behind the scene, but I think it's all worth it because you have full control about what your child is being exposed to and how you want your child to learn or what they will learn. So for our very first book study, I picked this book, Fanny Crosby, Do Great Things for God. Now, we've had this book for quite a while, and my daughter loved me to read it to her over and over. So she is very familiar with this book, and she also listens to the audiobook from a different series for older children, but she enjoys that one too. So she's very familiar with the story of Fanny Crosby. Now, I picked this one just because the language is simple and it is for younger children, and it's not a lot of text. It's something short that she can read quickly, even though sometimes she still complains about it, but I think it's simple enough for her to follow instead of long, intricate storyline. Now, we are a Christian family, and our family also chooses not to read fiction. So we choose nonfiction books that still have storyline. That way you can still learn about literary devices and story components and all that kind of stuff. And so we are going to focus on bios, nonfiction bios, and about Christians or people in history. That way we can still learn about literacy, but also learn about history at the same time. And that's one of the reasons why I chose this book. Now, you can easily find a book companion, a book study on TPT or other websites. There are other curriculums that are literature-based, but I have not seen anybody has done a book study or a book companion for this book. But the publisher, which is the Good Book Company, they have a free resources for these series, Do Great Things for God. So if you go to their website, you can download them for free. And actually, right now, they are selling the images, the images of the book, all of these, they are giving it away for free on their website. So you can download them, you can print them without the text, of course, but you can use the pictures to use it for your book study. And I'm going to show that to you. So this is what we're doing for our book study, very first book study. The first thing that we did was not this book. So we went to our notebook first with our reference tabs from the Steallar Teacher Company on TPT. So since my daughter is still kind of on the young side, I'm not going to rush her through all of these things. So this time we're just going to focus on characters. So what I did, the first thing that I did with her was I just read this to her, and she read it with me, and she looked at it with me, and I made sure she was kind of understanding what we're talking about here. Now, she may not grasp everything here because this is a lot of information for a 6-year-old, but just plant it in her mind that we are going to be talking about characters. We've been doing character studies, character trait studies separately, a spiritual character trait studies. So that's the first thing that we did. We just discussed this and look at this. Now, that took one session. After that, she was exhausted, or at the time she wasn't interested. So I was like, okay, this is going to take a while, maybe a week. Okay, and then the next thing that we did, we read this book. Now, like I said, we've read this book. I've read this book many times to her, but this time I made her read this to me. Now, I had some kind of pushback. I think that day that it was just an off day. She was not interested in learning. She was just wanting to play. But we did read this and read the whole thing. And I don't know if you ever read this book, but this book has a timeline at the end. I did make her read this, but I just pointed this out to her. And also it has a picture of the real Fanny Crosby. And these are the rest of the books in this series, and there are more. So if you go to their website, you will see more of these. Now we have most of this, but not all of them. So that's what we did. So we discussed character from the reference sheet, and then we read the book. So we did the character and we read the book. So we did that in one sitting. And then when I figured out she was tired, I didn't push for more. So the next day, the next time we came together, that's when I showed her the things that I have set up for her, and I'm gonna show it to you in just a minute. So the first thing that she sees is the cover, and if you saw my post or my video on how I did the book anatomy lesson with her, you can go back and check that out. But that's what we did first. This is our first activity. I made her to identify the parts of the cover. So there's spine, front cover, title, hardcover, illustrator, author. And then the next thing that we did was we talk about character, Fanny's character. So there's physical traits and there's also an internal trait of her character. So I asked her to observe Fanny. Now I got this image from, I actually wanted to sell like a book companion for this book, but at that time I wasn't, so I made someone drew this for me, and but at that time I wasn't confident if it was gonna be well, it was, if I was gonna make some sales, so I didn't move forward with that idea. If you think I should, let me know. But anyway, so we read the book, and we read the book slowly this time, and I pointed out to her if there's some indication showing Fanny's character. I asked her, so what character trait does that show? And she would answer, she was able to answer most of these, but not always. So I had to point it out to her because she's just not familiar with all these things. So I had to point that out to her. So we got content, happy, thankful, smart, joyful, excited, mischievous. And this is the picture when Fanny was being mischievous with her friends at school. And then for physical traits, she got rosy cheeks, and then brown hair and glasses. And then the next activity that we did was, I got this picture from the download from the Good Book Company. I utilized that so I didn't have to scan my book or anything like that. So what character trait did Fanny show when people pitied her? So we talked about that, and she said content and joyful. It's kind of hard to see, but anyway, she loves drawing, so whenever she sees a chance to draw, she wants to draw. Just like this one, I didn't make her do that. All right, so the next activity that we did was, I also had someone illustrated this for me with the intention to sell, but that's another story. Okay, so I asked her to narrate how the dream that she dreamt went. So she was able to narrate this back to me, and I wrote it down for her because her handwriting is just so big and she doesn't have the stamina to write all of these things. So I wrote it for her. And because we've read this book so many times, her wording is pretty identical to the book. So that's that. And then the next thing is the story about how the hymn Safe in the Arms of Jesus was written. It was such an interesting story. That's why I wanted her to narrate that back to me. And once again, I wrote it for her, and she did her oral narration. All right, and that's the next thing. This is, I got this from the Good Book Company, the free resources that you can download for this book. So basically a drawing. This is a baby Fanny and her sister and her mother, and then just simple questions like this, and true or false, or which one, or true. And then the next thing that we did was a copy work. So she was basically just tracing, and I think she needs this type of activity when she can trace good handwriting instead of just relying off her current handwriting that can be sloppy sometimes. So this is a good practice for her. So this is a poem that Fanny wrote when she was 8, and it's very famous. You can look it up online, but it's also in the book here, in the back of the book. It's not in the storyline, but it's in the timeline. So it's this one. So I made her write that. And she wanted to use different colors for each letter. That took a long time. But anyway, that worked out. And so the last thing that we did was, and once again, I made this with the intention to sell. This is a list of Braille alphabets. And so we did a craft on Braille letters, Braille alphabets. So I asked her to write one of Fanny's characters, and she chose happy. So she wanted to write happy. So these are just brackets, and I made the 6 cells for her to punch in her brackets. And so she will look at this, and for the letter H, she's going to find out where she's going to punch her brackets on, which cells. So that's what we did. This is our last activity for this book study. And as I said in my story, we actually did this in one day. I thought I was going to get some pushback, but she actually did everything today. One of the things that we also learned is how to use a dictionary. So whenever we came across a word that we didn't know or not familiar with, or I pointed out to her and asked her if she knew what it meant. And if she didn't, then we would go to the dictionary and to look up that word. So for the first one, I just showed it to her how this works, and then for the second and third one, I kind of guided her how to find the definition in this book. So one of the words that we had to look up was in the poem that Fanny wrote, and this word resolved. We didn't know, or she didn't know what it meant, so we looked that up, and I didn't make her to write it down. We just discussed it. Maybe I can write it down here, so and whenever she looks into this, she can remember that we looked that up. And then another word that we didn't know, or that she had to look up, was thrilled. We didn't write it down, but anyway, it was in the text. The story says she was thrilled. Fanny was thrilled, so we looked that up. And then another word was mischievous. This wasn't in the text, but there was mischief in the book. So for her character, we wrote down mischievous. So we had to look that up too. So that was neat. That was a good introduction to book study and also how to use this dictionary. So that's how our first book study went, and I cannot wait to do the next one with her. And I'm thinking about starting her on a chapter book and do something different after this, and then go back to the same format after a chapter book. But I'm not quite sure, and I don't know where she is mentally, but I'm going to try to do a chapter book with chapter summary. So I'm going to teach her how to do summarizing like this one. So that's my plan, and then after that we're going to go back to this kind of format so I can break it up, and so it's not too boring. And as long as there's an opportunity for her to draw, I think she's going to be just fine. So that's how our first book study went, and I hope that could be an inspiration to you, an idea, a resource for you. And once again, no curriculum needed. I mean, I did look around, I did some research how to do this type of activities, but after so much researching and everything, I think you can do this on your own. I was inspired by some Instagram accounts, and I'm gonna link them, and some people do it differently, but this is how I'm going to do it for now. And since I use a spelling curriculum and I will be using a grammar curriculum, I'm not too worried about pulling spelling words from the text. I'm not too worried about pulling vocabulary and have her write it down. I will use some type of vocabulary curriculum, but not too much. I don't know, it's still up in the air, so I'll keep you updated. But you can basically do book studies on your own. But like I said earlier, there are curriculums that are literature based, like Moving Beyond the Page, 5 in a row, and I think both are Christians, if I'm not mistaken. And another one is Learning Through Language Arts, if I'm not mistaken, and Brave Writer. I've looked into those, and they mostly use fiction, and like I said, my family chooses not to read fiction, so that's why I'm doing this on my own. Now, if there are um, resources that use non-fiction, I would gladly use them. But for now, for my daughter's age, I think this is good enough just to get her feet wet. As long as she's reading, as long as she's comprehending, we don't really need fancy curriculum. So yeah, I just wanted to share that, and I hope that this was helpful. So if it did, and if you have any questions, once again, of course, you can always ask me a question in the comment or DM me. And that's all I have for you today. Have a blessed day.
So this is how you write when you're blind. So I put pins and I'm trying to write happy. So this is how I'm going to pretend I'm blind.